Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf, and there's a lot going on in the Middle East that we're going to get an update. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with Laith Marouf. Ooh, my head's down awful low there. There we go. Garland here with Laith Marouf. It's Tuesday, so we got a lot to talk about. Don't forget, and this is critical, particularly right now, his site is freepalestine.video, freepalestine.video. Go there, please donate right now, especially you never know what with potential conflict happening, and you know how Google and all these other sites are. They could cut them off, they could shut them down, whatever. So it is critical that as soon as possible you go donate to help keep his English language news site up. And also share it on all your social media platforms. When you share it on your social media platform, just make sure that you put a note with that post for people to go there and to donate as quickly as possible before anything happens, or they could be shut down or anything. We're hoping that that won't happen, but we want to make sure that we take advantage of this opportunity to support them while we can. All right, let's start here. Big stuff going on in the Middle East. Now, of course, everyone's haven't been under a rock. We know about the Israeli assassinations and the potential right now. I would argue the probability of a retaliation, but I understand there's been some dust-ups, shall we say. Hezbollah, Iraq. Let's talk.
Yes. Thank you for having me again, man. Yesterday there was two different separate attacks on the major American base in Iraq, Ain al-Assad, in the morning and in the evening, and both of them, the Pentagon is saying, have resulted in injuries. They haven't told us if anybody died of the American soldiers. I almost said Israeli soldiers. Well, they're here to defend Israel, so might as well call them that. But the point is, the resistance in Iraq used Katyusha missiles and drones in both attacks, and they in fact we saw the vehicle that they used to launch these Katyushas. They left it, abandoned it, and escaped on motorbikes into the desert. But the point is, this is an improvised pickup truck that had launchers for Katyushas and for drones in the back bed of the pickup truck, but it's all hidden basically. So it's a very fancy design, and I think it was on purpose left for the Americans to see in order to give them a warning of what's coming in the situation of a full-out war. This resulted in practically all the American Air Force in the region going up in the air, this attack on Ain al-Assad. So we saw all the jet fuelers being tracked, and all the planes taking off from Qatar and Saudi and Kuwait. And that shows you how worried they were about their actual planes on the ground and how serious they took this threat, because these drones and Katyushas that hit the main base in Iraq, American occupation base, were not intercepted. There was no warning for them. And also later on last night, there was an attack on an American base in Syria in Deir ez-Zor province. So again, we're seeing the testing of the American air defenses in general. I mean, this is Ain al-Assad. They have probably THAAD and the Patriot and other anti-drone air defense systems. This is the most important base of the occupation. So for it to be penetrated so easily, so with the heightened security level that all these spaces are under in preparation for a response from the axis of resistance, This was an indication both for the American military, what's going to happen to them if they actually engaged in this war, and for the American public, who should take this very seriously if they don't want to see their children coming back in coffins, and if they don't want to see these politicians take the United States down into a regional war on behalf of a genocidal regime.
Let me add this to that. And I think one of the things that's very important here that a lot of people will miss is the nature of low-tech technology and the difficulty that high-tech countries have with it. Here's what I mean. During the Iraq War, I remember reading an article, and I had somebody that I know in the military talk to me about it that was there. And so what the Iraqis did was they would plant a roadside bomb. They would, when the Americans would come along, it had a cell phone. They would call the cell phone, the bomb goes off, hits the American convoy. The American convoy then put cell phone blockers on their convoy. So you're going along, you can't call it. So here's what they did. They just reversed it. They called the cell phone with an open line. When you drove by with the cell phone blocked, when you blocked the line, then it blew up, right? The Americans then figured that out, right? And you know what the Iraqis did? They tied a string to it. And they had somebody a couple hundred yards away. And when the Americans drove by, he yanked on the string, a piece of fishing line, whatever, he yanked on it and it blew up. Meaning, the bottom line is, when it comes to low technology, there is no way to stop a guy yanking on a string. You're going to get blown up. My point being this: they could fly around, they could look for rocket launchers, they could look for missile launchers, but somebody's running around with a pickup truck. They could put something over the bed and put fruit and vegetables or fish or something like that, or an old washing machine on top of that. Then when the plane flies over, they move the washing machine, they fire the missiles, they put it back. So really, when you have a high-tech military, it is actually easily defeated by the low technology stuff. But
especially when we're talking about an occupation force with a whole population that is hostile to them. It's a game of numbers, really. And this is why occupations don't work, except when you go full genocidal, as happened in the Americas and Oceania. If there's enough indigenous people that are alive, they will fight you on and on and on. It will end. And as we see right now, this is what's happening in Palestine. And this is why we hear Smotrich yesterday making a statement saying that they want to starve 2 million people in Gaza to death, that this is a moral decision, but that the world is not letting them. This is they're saying this out loud what they say to each other in their closed doors. And look at what Hezbollah did since the morning, by the way. We're talking about testing the defenses. There was multi waves of drone swarms sent on many of the major bases in the north of occupied Palestine, and one of them being this huge base in Naharia. Naharia is the main city before Akka, which is just north of Haifa. So when you cross the border from Lebanon, 30 kilometers south on the Mediterranean is Naharia, and then another like 20 kilometers you're in Akka. Point is, these drones were filmed by all these Israeli colonists passing over all their towns and villages in the north to hit this main base in Naharia. And there was nothing, no air defenses being fired anywhere. Okay, so today Hezbollah just gave a hint and at the same time tested the paths that they have mapped out after 10 months of shelling and bombarding and firing all these drones on the zone of like around 30 somewhat kilometers inside North Palestine. They have mapped out probably the most secure paths for these drones to reach even further. And today they they showed it, and they hit the base and the barracks. The Israelis are still hiding the death count that they have from these attacks, but the colonists are so scared in the north of Palestine that they are filming everything. They even filmed the explosion inside these bases. Some of them walked in and filmed the barracks burning and the cars burning. Okay, because they are pissed off that the colonial state cannot provide them security, not because they want to, help Hezbollah or something. And they're under orders not to share any of these things on social media as colonists in the north. But now we are seeing videos that we haven't been seeing before because these colonists are too scared. And the mayor of Naharia and the mayor of Haifa both made statements saying that the state of Israel has abandoned them, abandoned all of the north of Palestine. And yesterday, the mayor of Kiryat Shmona, which is the biggest colony in the Hula Valley, the panhandle of Palestine, called for full evacuation of all the colonists. Something like 70,000 people live in Kiryat Shmona. Now it's emptied. He asked all the residents to leave, and he asked the residents of the adjacent and colonies that are smaller to also leave. So we're seeing an evacuation of all of the Hula Valley, and the war didn't even start.
Wow. Let me ask you this. I remember some time back where you had said there were a lot of people who would come to Jordan. There were a lot of people. I remember the Taliban, saying, give us free passage to Israel, we'll fight them. It was clear that while there are a number of governments that are horrified, quite horrified, they're of the consequences of going against the West, right? That are trying to do everything they can, and now they're trapped between a citizenry that's pretty much 100% in favor of the Palestinians and their allegiance to the West, right? Your thoughts on if a full regional war were to start, and I know this is just sheer speculation. One of the things that I suspected is some of these governments will fall. Some of the militaries in these governments may overthrow the governments and say, well, we're just going to get involved. There could be people in the military in some governments who are so sympathetic to the Palestinians that the militaries revolt against some of these people, instability in some of these countries, and that there are a lot more people. I don't trust Erdogan. He said, I may get involved, but I suspect that the pressure from his population is so heavy that he has to make those kind of statements, whether he wants to or not. The pressure, yes. And so I'll end up like this. The pressure from the populations in the Arab world, in the Persian world, if there's a conflict, what is the outcome from the level of pressure and the level of outrage that you would see?
We saw 2 days ago the Jordanians starting to freak out. They kind of buckled even faster than the Zionists in terms of the psychological warfare that with the whole axis of resistance. Taking their time with the response. And first, they were barking and saying, we will not allow anything to pass our air, so on and so forth. And then they got called in. The Iranian government sent a message saying to the foreign affairs minister of Jordan, come here now. Come here, boy. Okay? And he came flying. Okay? And his demeanor when he came out of the meeting in front of the media, there is right now hundreds of memes that were made in the region of how he looked, the expressions on his face, the words that came out of his mouth. There was a clear, whatever was said to him in that meeting must have been, if you intervene and shoot down Iranian or axis of resistance, projectiles going towards the Zionist colony, you will be hit. That's the only thing that you can understand from it. And this is why today, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Jordan said, we are staying out of this. We will not allow the United States or Israel or anybody else to use our airspace to take down the Iranian and other projectiles going to Israel. Egypt said the same thing without being called in. But what happened with Egypt? They had to actually call Erdogan and have a meeting between Egypt and Turkey. They're, mortal enemies, Turkey and Egypt, since Erdogan and the Muslim Brotherhood, helped in the coup in Egypt and so forth. So suddenly we see a statement coming out of Turkey and Egypt together after this meeting, saying that Turkey and Egypt, as the largest countries in the region, which they are, 90 somewhat million Turkey and 110 million Egypt, the biggest Muslim countries in the region, they use even the word Muslim. Suddenly, Sisi found Islam, it seems like, that we will not allow a destabilization. A very vague, but also shows you, if you count it with the statement by Egypt saying that they're not going to shoot down anything, and the statement by Erdogan just before this meeting saying that they have cut their military weapons sales to Israel after 10 months. He's been selling them weapons, not being only the main trade partner and feeding them and sending them the diapers for the soldiers. He's also been sending them weapons for 10 months. Suddenly he's saying, okay, we're cutting now. But he didn't cut the trade as a whole. But you see, like, we can see how all of these countries are right now scared. They can't do what master wants in the White House. Okay. The streets were packed in Jordan with public funeral processions for Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political bureau of Hamas. The main mosque in Istanbul had not only a huge funeral with 200,000 people showing up, but also ran a documentary about Ismail Haniyeh. There's now a huge poster banner outside the Hagia Sophia for Haniyeh. There is no picture of Erdogan on the mosque, but now there's a picture of Haniyeh. So these countries, all of them, are really worried. By the way, the Taliban, you mentioned Afghanistan, the Taliban had a national day of mourning and opened a funeral home for people to visit for Haniyeh. These are things that shows you the tectonic shift and what everybody is also expecting, that this response coming from the axis of resistance will actually lead to. Everybody is understand this is the end of American presence in the region, so on. We just don't know how bloody it's going to be and how much the Americans are willing to sacrifice for the Zionist colony. But where any and all of the main players that the Americans could have depended on in this coming confrontation are standing aside.
I interviewed Dr. Mohammed Marandi yesterday and asked him about it, and he was resolute. And basically what he said was, look, we have warned the other countries in the region that work with the U.S. that if the U.S. gets involved, that we will destroy their bases. And if they try to protect the U.S., then they'll be targets too. And he said, and if we will strike Israel, and if Israel retaliates, we'll retaliate, and again and again and again. Basically is, if Israel punches back, then as long as they want to go back and forth. But I don't think, and I think Iran has made a decision. It's now or never. But you can't allow someone to go. Israel has been doing this. They went to Iran and they would attack in Iran and they would murder scientists, or the day of the US empire acting with impunity ended in Ukraine. Ended in Ukraine when the Russians said we'll fight. The day of Israel and that part of the US empire acting without impunity ended in April or March, whenever it was, when Iran hit them, and they couldn't figure that out. And they haven't figured that out. But I think now they better figure it out, because this is going to be game, set, and match, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And look, I've said this on your show from the beginning, and I've said this when, I would appear on Sputnik with you in October. From day one, my assessment was we are in an existential war. When the Zionists were saying they are in existential war, they are being truthful. This is one of the moments that they're being truthful about, which means that the Zionists' only choice in front of them is the full genocide of the Palestinian people. There's no other option, and or the end of their colony when they say these words. Okay, so I think the leadership of the Axis of Resistance were trying to limit the number of casualties in this region and the disaster that's going to strike the whole world if a full-out war unfolds now. And for 10 months, in hopes that there's an exit, there's a way for the Zionists will not feel totally that this is an existential war, and they'll stop this, and then maybe they'll collapse internally or under the pressure of courts and international isolation and what have you. My assessment was this was never going to happen. The Zionists are going to go all the way, no matter what you try to do. And I think, given this, after these assassinations, in one day, taking out the commander-in-chief of Hezbollah, the head of Hamas, the leaders of the drone units of the Iraqi and Yemeni resistance, because one of the chiefs of the Yemeni drone units was in Iraq when the Americans assassinated that attacked last week also, you see. So what was left basically of valuable targets in the top of the hierarchy that the Zionists could get is only Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi, or the Ayatollah Khamenei. Those are the only ones that were left. So at this point, it was clear to anyone in the leadership of the Axis of Resistance that there is no way. The Netanyahu and the US have taken a decision that they want to go full force, and khalas, you have to call their bluff now, and you have to show and go be ready. And this is why they're taking their time at this moment. It's not because they're not ready for the response, attacking back at Israel. They already have set that in motion. What they're getting ready for is the defensive measures for the for sure 100% attack back by the Zionist colony and the United States that's going to come. And this is why it's taking its time. And I think we saw in the last 24 hours movements of Russian military cargo deliveries to both Syria and Iran. And we saw the meetings between the Iranian and the Russian top generals in Tehran, which basically announced that Russia will be defending Iran, will be on the side of Iran of any full-out war. So we're seeing right now deliveries of these systems. And as soon as those systems are active, then we will see the response from the Axis of Resistance. And by the way, in the next hour, there will be a speech by Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah on the 1-week anniversary of the assassination of the commander-in-chief of Islamic Resistance here, Sayyid Shukr. So we will, probably be getting more hints on what's going to come.
What are your thoughts on Russia? How are the Russians viewed in the region as far as their part in this thing, in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's becoming clear that there is truly two camps. Before, some people may have been able to, number one, confuse others and say, hey, Russia is just playing with our lives. Like they would say, oh, Iran is in bed with Israel and the Americans, and it's all just, conspiracy, a whole world conspiracy. And similarly, people would, same way that the propaganda is played against China. Oh, China is capitalist and it's an empire. Some stupid people would say these things. So that's now become impossible to play as a propaganda because the battlefield is the loudest form of speech. And what the battlefield is showing us is Russian weapons, Iranian weapons, Syrian weapons, and fighters from all these countries working together to liberate Palestine. And everybody else that had criticism is silent and is not carrying a gun, and is so their actions speak louder than their words. These naysayers, these underminers of unity of people, these propagandists. And I think the Americans are having a really, really hard time. There was surveys done of Jordanian elite. Okay, this is I've never heard of surveys being done like this, but this was a survey done in Jordan last month. The results came out. The survey was done around the Christmas time of 200 elite names in the academic and the political and the military and the intelligence field about impressions of Iran and impressions of Hezbollah and impressions of the Ansarullah in Yemen, the shift in these individuals' impressions of them. And because, of course, there was decades of propaganda, hate propaganda against Hezbollah, Iran, because of their support of the Syrian government in face of the Wahhabi death squads or the quote-unquote Arab Spring. And that has now is gone. It's unbelievable. These elite in the most important positions in the society of Jordan are right now majority pro-Iranian, majority pro-Hezbollah, majority pro-Ansarullah in Yemen. These are, so the investment in the sectarianism and hate of Sunnis against Shia or Arabs against Persians, that has all disappeared.
I think if you could talk a little bit more about Yemen, I think Ansar Allah has been one of the most important factors, not just in their, incredible feat of shutting down the Red Sea, incredible feat of imposing an economic blockade on Israel, but their, how can I put this, philosophical, kind of spiritual leadership. You know what I mean? Everybody looks at them and they say, these guys, it's a poor country. They don't have anything, but the pride and the willingness to fight. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Look, the Saudis and the Americans and the Emiratis tried for more than a decade to tell us that Ansarullah do not represent the population of Yemen, and that the house slaves that are sitting in the hotels in Riyadh and Dubai are the true representatives of the Yemeni people. Okay, so what we see now is 10 months of Friday after Friday, millions of Yemenis out in the streets supporting the government of Sana'a in its actions, in how it's conducting itself on the international scene, what it's doing to support the Palestinian people. And this shows you how the Ansarullah government, coalition government, is the true representative of the will of the people. And that is, I think, the most important thing that any people want from their government. But yeah, okay, we all want services from our government, healthcare and education and good roads and what have you. But when you're under a colonial attack, your primary ask from your government is to be sovereign. Okay, and then you will forgive everything else if they can keep sovereignty. And that's what makes nations. That's what makes nations and nationhood. And clearly, the Yemeni people are a nation uh, uh, with all this poverty that you're talking about. They're richer than all of us. They have liberated all of the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, and have destroyed the Israeli economy, have knocked heads with the largest armadas of warships ever assembled.
They just shot down another one of those drones.
Oh, yes, and it's the seventh. It's their seventh. You remember, like maybe a few months ago, I was making the joke that they are the world champions. Okay, uncontested. Well, they're like the numbers right now. It's going to take decades for somebody else. I mean, if there's an America left after this war, honestly, American military, but there's nobody that can come close to their abilities to hunt down these American drones. Each one of them is 30 somewhat $million. 7 of them were already, close to $250,000, shut down by homemade air defense missiles. And the surface drones that they have in the sea, again, very impressive technology. They just released yesterday a video of one of these surface drones hitting a tanker ship with oil. It's pretty amazing to see what they're doing, and their effects right now, of course, is not only on the Zionist colony. We can see their effect on all the Western economy as a whole because of the shipping insurance increases and the longer routes of travel for goods to reach Europe and the United States, Eastern United States. So this is impressive for a nation. And I think, if there is a full-out war, we should all be looking for the amazing surprises that will happen in the Arabian Peninsula when Yemen actually takes on the local vessels in Arabia.
Yeah, I think you're right. Your thoughts on the issue, one of the issues that is consequential, that recently, Monday and Sunday, we've been having these stock market issues. And the art that now what they've said is it's because the United States had some bad job numbers or something. I don't think that's it. I think it's the world is like, holy crap, we're getting ready to lose all the oil from the Middle East. I think it was based on what you and I already know, and that is that this would be an interruption in oil supply. When I interviewed Dr. Morandi, one of the things that he said, basically this, and I'm not much paraphrasing, is we will destroy the world's economy, right? We'll destroy that. Basically, he kind of started off with, we'll respond, we'll respond to Israel. If the U.S. gets involved, we'll hit their bases. If they're protected by the vassal countries, they'll be targets too. And then he finished with, we'll wipe out the oil infrastructure. And it sounded like what he was saying is, if it gets to that point where they present that level of threat to Iran, then we have a card that we can play. And the card we can play is Europe, all of the West will injure economies. You ask yourself, is it worth it? How far do you want to go? Because the last card we'll play, if we have to, is we'll injure economies. If we wipe out the oil infrastructure, there's nothing you can do to fix that. There's no way out for that. Anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you see, like we are right now entered a ladder of escalation kind of moment, okay, or escalation ladder, and it will all depend on the responses of the Zionist colony and the United States to the axis of resistance combined attack that's coming. But I feel that, you know, it is a ladder of escalation, but it's also a snowball downhill ladder, and things are going to move very fast, out of hand, out of control. When you have these people in government in the Zionist colony that are saying they want to eradicate 2 million people in Gaza openly, and we see the riots that are happening inside the Zionist colony, whether it's we talked about it last week, I believe, the soldiers that were arrested for the gang rape of detainees, and those who came, including ministers that beat up military police to get these people out. They were also yesterday demonstrating at the military court. There was a riot and a crash into the court. And there was also, by the way, today, again, other riots by the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, that have been called into the military because the new law that forces them to be part of the Israeli military. So they're confronting and having, you know, streets fights and attacking the recruitment offices of the Israeli military. So it's deteriorating very fast inside. Okay, so when we say the Zionists are, you know, snowballing things, and we're gonna get to an all-out war, you know, clearly all the vessels will be hit. How fast? How it all of these things could happen very fast, or it could take a week or a month for things to back and forth. It depends on how the Zionists respond in the United States. But I see us going into a full-out war, and you could imagine a barrel of oil jumping to $500. What would that mean to the economies of Europe? This is amazing Zionist sonic boom. They've been doing this over and over the last few days. You can hear now the jet. Anyway, so they come over Beirut and they do these sonic booms, 2 jets at the same time, simultaneously, to make it even louder and much longer, the effect of it, just to scare people, right? These are sick individuals, okay? Sick individuals. This is what a sick nation is dragging humanity down to the abyss. By the way, we're already like jumped off the cliff right now. Okay.
Yeah. I want to ask you something, and that is, I suspect now, I think Russia and China, Africa, they all recognize something, and that is they've got a mad dog on their hands in the U.S. And I just say that, forget Ukraine or Israel, whatever, the U.S. empire. These are elements of imperialism. These are tools of imperialism, both Israel and I think these other rest of the world looks around and they realize they've got a frothing at the mouth mad dog on their hands, right? I would suspect that what we have is a worldwide axis of resistance, that if things get out of hand in the Middle East, Russia would probably do their big offensive in Ukraine. They got hundreds of people have been saying, why don't they do a big offensive? Why wouldn't they do a big offensive? Things go bad in the Middle East. Now they put pressure on the U.S. and they slam Ukraine, right, and do the big offense. Meanwhile, China, they could put pressure. They could do a blockade on Taiwan. I still believe that there are resistance forces in Africa, and that if things go start to go bad in the Middle East, there will be elements in Africa that say it's time to eject the U.S. imperialism, French imperialism, and that U.S. and or French bases will definitely be struck in Africa, hit hard in some regions, maybe embassies, etc. That basically it will go from a regional resistance. I think there is looming a worldwide resistance to U.S. imperialism. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look at how the American officials and spokespersons responded after these assassinations. They were like, Iran, 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 Iran. And you're like, God, we just watched somebody violate the sovereignty of a country and assassinate the negotiator that you are negotiating with, and you can't get yourself to say anything. I mean, did you see that one of the fascist spokesperson of the American government that was kept on being asked yesterday, well, do you think the assassination of the negotiator of Hamas is going to have an effect on the negotiations? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't think so. It's does Iran have a right to defend itself, right? Self-defense? No, it's not the same as Israel having a right to self-defense. So the the bloody cannibalistic attitude of the Zionists in the colony are the same in the Zionists in the elite in the United States. And the whole of humanity is watching, of course. I think clearly the effect on the stock market was because what happened here and what everybody's going to be expecting if things come out of hand, and because of the stupid way that the United States is dealing with this. They should have just like stepped back if they don't really want a world war. But what the US is trying to do here is to they're doing this bluff. They're trying to make an example of the axis of resistance to show Russia and China what they can do, and this is why we're being dragged there. There's a complex psychological complex that the West has of supremacy. I mean, look at the mad behavior in the Olympics against the Chinese swimmers that won for the first time, broke the monopoly that the United States has on the swimming. You can see how deep. Look at the riots that are happening in the United Kingdom, which are instigated by the Zionists. These are all, by the way, indicators of what's coming. I said on this show and on the Sputnik show also, from day one, I warned the Arab and Muslim communities in the West. They're coming for you. This war is going to expand fully, and you will be the target of pogroms, and you may end up in concentration camps, internment camps, like the Japanese and German, Americans and Canadians had to go through during World War II. And right now we see the beginnings of that. The Zionists are pissed off that the streets in the West are with Palestine, that the Palestinians were demonstrating over and over with all the support of the majority of the honorable populations in all these countries, including the United States, including Canada. Most people are human. Most people are against genocide. And what do? They set the dogs of fascism out in the streets, and the fascists in uniform, the police forces, sit back and watch them lynch and burn and do a Kristallnacht, basically, the nights of the broken glass before the Holocaust. That's what we are seeing, and people should expect this to be activated in many of the West. And it's also part of it's not only about the Arab and Muslim populations in the UK, for instance. The target is actually the majority of the British people who are anti-genocide, who don't see any true representation for themselves democratically. People are going to be living martial law. The minute this war breaks out regionally, you will see martial law being instituted in the United Kingdom. And the target is not only the Arabs and Muslims who will be interned, but it's the majority population, the British population, and others like Canadians and Americans. It's coming to you guys. It's coming. That the elite want to silence and drive you into this world war, this crazy world war, on behalf of apartheid colony that's at its deathbed.
I'll say this also. What I've seen is things that start in Israel or Ukraine. I've been saying this for a while. Watch what they do in Ukraine, because whatever they do in Ukraine is what they want to do here. Outlawing parties, doing kidnapping, all the terrible things that they're doing, outlawing religions, things of that nature. That's what's coming here. And I suspect that in the same way that Ukraine is starting to see now, people are burning the cars in the regions where they're trying, the kidnappers, they call them the draft people, the kidnappers, that in Israel and Ukraine, you're starting to see complete instability. It is clear that Israel is in, well, first of all, the last few years, how many prime ministers and governors have they gone through in the last few years since, in the last, say, 3 years? It's been completely an unstable government for the several years now, right? You're seeing internally, Ukraine starting to fall apart. You're seeing internally, Israel is a mess. The things that are going in there will come to here, because the people in America are going to wake up and realize, my God, look what they're doing to us. The instability, it's what you're saying, is from the people opposing a government that they don't believe in Israel. It's a whole crazy dynamic. But that's coming to the U.S. too, Laith. That instability is coming here. It's obvious.
Oh yes, and you could see how the Zionists within the U.S. government or the deep state, the real owners, and I don't mean Jews. I mean Zionists that believe in an imperialist project to have a colony here that is a spearhead for the empire in the region. Those there are activating these huge contradictions, pitting people to get against each other. The main working class, whatever their quote unquote racial background is, or cultural linguistic background, they're pitting all these people against each other in order to justify the martial law situation. I mean, we saw the stupid deputy mayor of Jerusalem tweeting at the UK government saying, this is what you get for letting the Muslims basically come to immigrate. We saw stupid Elon Musk tweeting, civil war is coming. He's flaming it. And they're making those demonstrations in the UK about, purity of English identity, blood, whatever you want to call it. That these small minority, by the way, the UK is not like the US. It's like less than 20% people that are racialized from Asia or Africa or whatever. The vast majority are original English with the packaging label on them still,
I also think that part of the destabilization, part of the madness we're seeing in Europe that's just starting, Europe is going to fall apart, because part of it is this: these countries they have so impoverished as they prostrate themselves at the feet of the U.S. empire, right? Cutting off Russian oil, Russian energy, industrializing, doing all of these things. They have so impoverished their people that the people are going mad. You know what I mean? That part of it is they impoverish the people. When the people say, hey, you impoverished us, they say, no, it's not us. It's the Muslims. It's the immigrant, here it's the illegal immigrants. So the government takes actions to impoverish the people. And when the people start looking at the ruling elite, they need a scapegoat. They point at the Muslims, at the immigrants, because they're different. People that have less than them, people that don't have anything, poor people living in a migrant house. And they're only there because the British and the US government bombed and destabilized their country, and they ran from war that your ruling elite started.
Oh yes. It's clear that even in the UK that the numbers are like 0.08% that are illegal refugees. It's not even a significant number. It's not like the U.S. has a huge border and there's people coming in. There's seas and canals and whatever. It's a hard trek to get to the UK.
Yeah.
So the numbers don't make sense, obviously, for this thing, and people in the working class that are British, English, so on, should be aware how they're being manipulated by the Zionists and the elite. And look, the main problem for the Western elite is that their economies, which is capitalism, is, it's not the regular business of I sell you something, you take my extra labor or whatever it is. No, capitalism is really about genociding other peoples and then looting their lands. That's the main drawer of actually capital in the Western system. If the oil fields of the Arabic countries in the Gulf and that of Iraq and Syria and Libya are liberated from American and Western economy, all of the people will be in the streets, because the elite now are unable to feed off more colonization. They play a pyramid scheme also. This is the thing. They siphon everything and they don't want to spend anything, the elite in the West. So they're constantly hungry. They want to colonize another land and loot another land. And if they can't, instead of spending more on their populace, so the populace doesn't feel the loss of loot, they actually start looting their own population. And that's what the British, American, French populace, German populace are feeling right now. Their elites are turning on them and sucking out everything they can from their own from the savings of the working class and the middle class. And this is why the elite are having to instigate these riots between cultural groups within these borders, so to divert away from the reality of the economic collapse. People should wake up in the UK, the US, and Canada before it's too late. Honestly, by the way, I have a feeling that you may not have an election in November in the US.
Really? Yeah, I'm starting to, because they're concerned about that. Their fear that, I think number one, not that Trump is anything great or different, but I think they fear anything being not completely under their control, right? And they can't have that. They already tried to take him out once. I wouldn't be shocked if they take another swipe at Trump, because let me show you something. Well, before we do this, real quick, we don't have much time. I did want to ask you this. In the, you've got these states, the Gulf states, the UAE, Bahrain, even Saudi Arabia, these states that, let's face it, have a very unhealthy relationship with Western imperialism. What happens? What do you see happening or changing in those states? I know the leaders are horrified right now. In the event that an all-out war breaks out in the Middle East, what do you see happening in these Gulf states?
Yeah, so let's say the Emirat or the Saudis shoot down Iranian missiles and drones, and then Iran attacks. They can't defend themselves. They can barely, the US can barely defend itself. So the US is going to be busy defending its bases. And they probably don't even have qualified soldiers that can man their air defenses. They need American or mercenary soldiers. Okay, they don't have people to. God damn Israelis, man. This one was even louder, and I'm not sure if you heard it, huh?
Was that a sonic boom, or did it sound like some kind of a bomb or missile or ordnance?
No, I think it was sonic booms. I hope, but I personally don't think it was. But it was very much closer than the last one also. Um, yeah, let's just take a look at any of the news sources here. Anybody saying anything? Um, yeah, this was more louder than any I've heard yet. So they must have been very close up here in the air, and all the doors and windows were shaking.
I see Israel set 1 second. Israeli fighter jets reportedly over Beirut. 2 more loud sonic booms heard.
Yes, so this is it. Sonic
Third
booms.
set of loud sonic booms heard.
Yeah.
Israeli warplanes have now done 3 in 25 minutes. Israeli broke the sound barrier over Beirut again.
You know, death to Israel.
Israel
Okay.
warplanes
I
fly over
mean,
Lebanese
like
capital.
I mean,
They can see the planes with naked eye. Yeah, that's what they're. It's
yeah.
what is the
Like
point of
when you do
intimidation
something
tactics?
like this for and the kids, okay, do you think the kids are gonna grow, say I love Israel, I love America, or they're gonna dance saying death to Israel, death to America? This is يعني خلاص man, the whole, all of humanity is sick, honestly, Garland, of you know, even talking to the West, uh, trying to reason with anybody. I personally, let me just be very frank with you here. I personally don't care anymore about the opinions of anybody in the West. I come on your show, Garland. I do this out of my drive for justice. But I don't think at this moment that the opinion of anybody in the West, in the public of the West, can change anything in my life, in the future of my children, the safety of
The
my
governments
children.
don't listen to us. The governments don't.
Yes.
They don't
And
listen to us at
and I
all.
also, this is it. We are dying here. We are dying for the freedom of humanity, not only our freedom. Our viewers here that really want to change the course of history and stop this genocide and stop us from going to world war need to take action. You cannot anymore just talk and go out in the streets and demonstrate. You need to take action like Palestine Action is doing in the UK. Today, they went into an Israeli weapons factory in the UK with a chain saws and destroyed all the machinery that's producing parts for the Israeli military in the UK.
Wow.
People need to take actions like this. It is otherwise, it's almost insignificant. Anyone that's now not taking action before it's too late, because believe me, when the martial law comes down, you're going to be biting your nails saying, why the hell didn't I do something before that? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, they will. Right now, what is obvious is this. Not only is it that the ruling elite in the West and the United States don't listen to the majority who opposes genocide, they hate them. They despise the very people in their own country as much as they despise people. You hear them talk about the people. Benjamin Netanyahu comes, a brutal murderer, and they stand and they support him. And anyone who's the people who stand up and say this is wrong, they despise their own people. This is a sick, twisted Nazi ideology that, let's face it, it didn't originate near Israel. That's the outer end of it. You know what I mean? That's the outer end of this.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Laith Marouf, don't forget, everybody, especially now, you see what's going on, how important it is. FreePalestine.video. That is the website. Now, it is critical that you go to FreePalestine.video and that you donate to help keep them going. It is critical that you do it now before anything happens, because who knows how things could change and get blocked, number one. It is also critical that you share FreePalestine.video on all your social media platforms. and that you put a note in the post to everyone, telling them the same thing that I'm telling them. Hey, everybody, you got to go to this website. You got to donate as soon as possible, because we need the information and we needed to get out to people here. Thank you very much, Laith Marouf. And, be careful. I'm
Thank you,
glad that
brother.
it was only an intimidation tactic, and free Palestine.
Thank you, Habibi. See you soon.